Part 3, Smoke and Mirrors. A Hank Sledge mystery. Previously on the Flitchman fortune, Hank discovered that the mysterious RM was Ricardo Moretti, a mob enforcer. He also learned that Thomas Flitchman was somehow connected to Morty, and that Arthur Flitchman was secretly meeting with the mobster to sign over warehouse properties. But when violence erupted at the Velvet Room, both Arthur and Moretti disappeared, leaving behind blood and unanswered questions. Dawn was breaking over the city like a cracked egg, spilling yellow light across the gray streets. I hadn't slept, but sleep was for suckers who didn't have missing heiresses and mob connections to worry about. The contract I'd lifted from the Velvet Room sat on my desk like a smoking gun, and I was trying to figure out which end was pointed at me. Mediterranean Imports. I'd heard that name before, but I couldn't place where. I called my contact at City Hall, a clerk named Paulie who owed me a favor from when I'd kept his gambling debts from reaching his wife's ears. Mediterranean Imports is a shell company, Paulie whispered into the phone. Registered last month. No real business address, just a P.O. box. But get this, the incorporation papers list Thomas Flitchman as president. So Junior wasn't just the family disappointment after all. He was running a front company for the mob, using Daddy's warehouses to wash dirty money. But where did Abigail fit into this cozy arrangement? I was mulling over the possibilities when my office door opened without a knock. The dame who walked in moved like trouble in high heels, and she had the kind of curves that could make a man forget his own name. But it wasn't her figure that caught my attention. It was the small automatic pistol in her gloved hand. "Mr. Sledge, I believe you have something that belongs to me." She was tall, red-haired, with green eyes that could freeze whiskey. Her voice had a slight accent I couldn't place, and her dress probably cost more than most people made in a year. "Lady, I collect a lot of things. You'll have to be more specific." She smiled, but it had all the warmth of a mortician's handshake. "The contract you took from the Velvet Room last night. I'm here to collect it. And you are. Let's just say I'm someone who takes a professional interest in Mediterranean imports." I leaned back in my chair, trying to look relaxed while calculating the distance to my desk drawer where I kept my spare .38. "Sorry, sweetheart, but I'm fresh out of contracts. Besides, you're a little late to the party. That place got shot up before I could grab anything interesting." Her laugh was like crystal breaking. "Mr. Sledge, we both know you're not that foolish. The contract, please. I'd hate for this conversation to become unpleasant." Before I could answer, the window behind me exploded in a shower of glass. I hit the deck as bullets started chewing up my office like an angry termite. The redhead dove behind my filing cabinet, and for a moment, we were allies in survival. "Friends of yours," I shouted over the gunfire. "Apparently not," she shouted back, returning fire through the broken window. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it started. In the silence that followed, I could hear car doors slamming and engines starting. Whoever had been shooting was making their exit. I stood up carefully, glass crunching under my feet. The redhead was checking her pistol with professional efficiency. "Thanks for the dance, sweetheart, but next time let's try somewhere with better ventilation." She straightened her dress and fixed her hair like getting shot at was just another social inconvenience. "This isn't over, Mr. Sledge. That contract is important to some very dangerous people. It seems like everybody's dangerous these days. What makes your people special? Because we have something you want." She paused at the door, looking back at me with those killer green eyes. "We have Abigail Flitchman." Before I could react, she was gone, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and cheaper threats. I looked around my shot-up office and decided it was time to change venues. Whoever was playing this game had raised the stakes to include bullets, and I needed to find out who was holding the cards before someone dealt me a permanent hand. The morning was heating up like a politician's promises when I decided to pay Victoria Flitchman another visit. If dangerous people were claiming to have her sister, she deserved to know about it. Besides, I was starting to think the Flitchman family had more secrets than a confessional, and it was time to shake some of them loose. I found Victoria at her sister's penthouse, going through papers with the kind of systematic efficiency that spoke of desperation. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the strain around her eyes. "Any word from the kidnappers?" she asked before I could say anything. "Not kidnappers, at least not the usual kind." I told her about the redhead's visit and her claim about having Abigail. Victoria went pale. What did this woman look like? Tall, red hair, green eyes. Moved like she knew how to use that gun she was waving around. Had a slight accent, maybe European. Victoria sat down heavily in one of Abigail's expensive chairs. "That sounds like Katerina Volkov. Friend of the family? Hardly. She works for people who loan money at very high interest rates. The kind of interest that gets paid in blood if you're late with a payment." The pieces were starting to form a picture, and it was uglier than a back alley abortion. "Your father's been borrowing from loan sharks." Victoria nodded miserably. "The furniture business has been losing money for years. Cheap imports are killing us. Father's been trying to keep the company afloat, but—" She trailed off, wrapping her arms around herself. "But he got in over his head and started dealing with the wrong people. He thought he could handle it. He always thinks he can handle everything." Victoria looked up at me with eyes full of tears she was too proud to shed. "They have my sister, don't they? They're using her to make sure father pays what he owes." It made sense. Arthur Flitchman gets desperate, borrows money from the mob. When he can't pay it back, they take his most precious asset, his daughter and heir. But why the elaborate charade with Ricardo Moretti and the warehouses? "There's something else," I said. "Your brother Thomas is mixed up in this somehow. He's running a company called Mediterranean Imports, and your father's been signing over warehouse properties to it." Victoria's laugh was bitter. "Of course he is. Thomas has always been jealous of Abigail. This is probably his idea of getting even. Even enough to sell her out to the mob. You don't know my brother, Mr. Sledge. He's weak, spiteful, and he's never forgiven Abigail for being everything he couldn't be." I was about to ask more questions when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy footsteps, the kind that belonged to men who didn't bother knocking. "We've got company," I whispered, drawing my gun. The front door exploded inward, and 3 men in expensive suits poured through like water through a broken dam. They moved with professional precision, and the hardware they were carrying wasn't for show. "Nobody move." The leader was a thin man with dead eyes and a voice like gravel. "We're here for the papers." "What papers?" I asked, though I had a pretty good idea. "Don't play dumb, Sledge. The Volkov woman said you'd be difficult." So the redhead had sent the cleanup crew. That meant she wasn't working alone, and it meant the stakes had just gone up again. "The papers aren't here," Victoria said, her voice steadier than I would have expected. The thin man smiled, and it was like watching a snake decide whether to bite. "Then we'll just have to convince you to remember where you put them." He nodded to one of his companions, who started toward Victoria with the kind of smile that belonged in a nightmare. I was calculating angles and odds when the lights went out. In the darkness that followed, all hell broke loose for the second time in 12 hours. I heard Victoria scream, the sound of furniture breaking, and the distinctive pop-pop-pop of small-caliber gunfire. I rolled behind the couch and tried to figure out who was shooting at whom. When the emergency lighting kicked in, 2 of the gunmen were down, and the third was nowhere to be seen. Victoria was crouched behind the kitchen counter, and standing in the doorway with a smoking automatic in her hand was Thomas Flitchman. "Well, that was exciting," he said, his voice surprisingly steady for a man who just killed 2 people. "Thomas?" Victoria stood up, looking confused. "What are you doing here?" "Saving your ungrateful hide, apparently." He tucked the gun inside his jacket with practiced ease. "Though I have to admit, I'm getting tired of cleaning up this family's messes." "You're working with them," I said, keeping my own gun trained on him. "Mediterranean Imports, the warehouses, the whole setup." Thomas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Working with them? Detective, you have no idea how this game is played." "Then educate me." "The loan sharks have Abigail. Father owes them more money than this family has ever seen. So I made a deal. I help them launder their money through our warehouses, and they keep my sister alive. What kind of brother sells out the family business? The kind who's trying to save what's left of his family, Thomas snapped. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to get in bed with killers and thieves? But somebody had to do something besides wring their hands and hope for the best. Victoria was staring at her brother like she'd never seen him before. Thomas, what have you done? What I had to do, what father was too proud to do. He ran a hand through his hair, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. The Volkov organization gave us 6 months to pay back what we owe. That was 4 months ago. How much? I asked. $2 million plus interest. I whistled low. That was serious money, the kind that could buy a small country or get you killed trying to find it. So where do I fit into this happy family reunion? Thomas looked at me with something that might have been respect. You're the wild card, Sledge. Nobody planned on Arthur hiring a private detective. The Volkovs are getting nervous, and nervous criminals do stupid things. Like kidnapping heiresses. Like killing everyone who might connect them to this deal. Thomas checked his watch. We need to get out of here. The police will be here soon, and there are questions I can't answer without putting more people in danger. As we headed for the door, I noticed something that had been bothering me since Thomas walked in. How did you know we were in trouble? I've been watching the building. When I saw Volkov's men go up, I figured it was time to pick a side. And you picked your family. I picked my sister. There's a difference. We made it to the street just as the sirens started wailing in the distance. Thomas led us to a black sedan that looked like it belonged to someone who took their privacy seriously. Get in, he said. We need to talk, and we need to do it somewhere the Volkovs won't think to look. As we drove through the city streets, I tried to put together the pieces of this increasingly complicated puzzle. Arthur Flitchman had borrowed money from the Russian mob. When he couldn't pay it back, they'd taken Abigail as collateral. Thomas had tried to save his sister by helping the mobsters launder money through the family business. But somewhere along the way, things had gone sideways. Where are we going? Victoria asked from the back seat. Somewhere safe, Thomas replied. At least I hope it's still safe. We ended up in a warehouse district that looked like it had been forgotten by everyone except the rats and the wind. Thomas parked behind a building that had seen better decades and led us through a side door that opened with a key he produced from his pocket. Inside, the warehouse was divided into makeshift rooms, and it was clear that someone had been living there. There were cots, canned food, and enough ammunition to fight a small war. Welcome to my home away from home, Thomas said bitterly. Not exactly Park Avenue, but it keeps the Volkovs from dropping by uninvited. How long have you been hiding here? Since the night Abigail disappeared. The Volkovs made it clear that my usefulness had limits and I'd reached them. Victoria was looking around the warehouse with growing horror. Thomas, what happened to Abigail? Where is she? Thomas sat down heavily on one of the cots. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because I don't think the Volkovs have her. What do you mean? I mean I think someone else grabbed her first. Someone who knew about our deal with the Russians and decided to use it for their own purposes. The implications hit me like a freight train loaded with bad news. You're saying Abigail was kidnapped by someone else, and the Volkovs are just playing along to keep their money laundering operation going. That's exactly what I'm saying, and I think I know who did it. Before Thomas could elaborate, we heard the sound of cars pulling up outside. Multiple cars with engines that purred like expensive cats. Company, I said, checking my gun. Thomas was already moving toward a window, peering through dirty glass at the street below. Volkovs, at least 6 men, maybe more. How did they find us? Doesn't matter now. Thomas grabbed a rifle from a rack on the wall. What matters is that we're trapped, and they're not here to negotiate. The first shots came through the windows like angry hornets, and we hit the deck as glass showered down around us. I could hear men shouting in Russian, coordinating their attack with military precision. Is there another way out? I shouted over the gunfire. Back door leads to the alley, but they'll have it covered by now. Victoria was pressed against the wall, her face pale but determined. What do they want? To tie up loose ends, Thomas replied, firing back through the broken window. And right now we're all loose ends. The shooting intensified, and I could hear footsteps on the roof above us. They were coming from multiple directions, professional and methodical. In a few minutes, they'd have us surrounded completely. There's something I need to tell you, Thomas said during a brief lull in the gunfire. About Abigail, about who really has her. Save it for later, I said. Right now, let's focus on staying alive. But even as I said it, I knew our chances were getting slimmer by the minute. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and running out of options. Somewhere in the city, Abigail Flitchman was waiting to be rescued, and here we were, pinned down like rats in a trap. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd started this case looking for a missing heiress, and now I was about to join her in whatever fate awaited people who got too close to the Volkov organization's business. But I hadn't become a private detective by giving up when the odds were bad. And Thomas Flitchman, for all his faults, was turning out to be tougher than anyone had given him credit for. "What's the plan?" Victoria asked, reloading a pistol she'd found somewhere. "We fight our way out," I said, "and then we go find your sister. And if we don't make it out," I looked at her, this brave dame who'd hired me to find her sister and ended up in a shooting war with Russian mobsters, "then we make sure they remember us." The next wave of gunfire was heavier, more concentrated. They were making their final push, and we were about to find out if the Flitchman family had any fight left in them. End of part 3. Trapped in a warehouse with Russian mobsters closing in. Hank and the Flitchmans are running out of time and options. But Thomas claims to know who really kidnapped Abigail, and it's not who anyone expected. Don't miss the explosive conclusion in part 4. Like this story and subscribe for the finale. Who do you think really has Abigail Flitchman? Drop your final predictions in the comments below. The answer will shock you.